thank you for being here, and thank you for bringing the sound of New Orleans to Tucson.
No problem.
Just a few things about Delfeayo that you need to know. Of course, your background is that you've played with Ray Charles and Art Blakey and Max Roach and Elvin Jones. And then you started the Uptown Jazz Orchestra. 10 albums in at this point. You're also an accredited and awarded producer, Grammy winning, and NEA Jazz Master. So I want to congratulate you on all those accomplishments.
Correct on all parts.
And also, there's the altruistic side, the idea of the Uptown Music Theater, which you started, and that was very much influenced by your brother Mboya. And can you tell us, why do we kick off with that? Because in a way, when I think of you as your father's son and what Ellis Marsalis brought to New Orleans as far as education and a focus on education. Tell us about Uptown Music Theater and the 16 musicals that you've written, et cetera.
Well, education is, my dad often gets credit in New Orleans, but there's so many individuals, even if you go back to King Oliver and Louis Armstrong, it's always how not only the music, but the cultural things and family values and things, we would say that probably comes straight from the motherland. And in Africa, you see that there's a way that folks pass on this information. So when I think back, Danny Barker, for example, who taught the entire generation that was born like late 50s, early 60s, he taught that entire generation how to correctly play the traditional New Orleans music. And it was just something that was important to him. And Kid Jordan is another educator that was very important to me. Clyde Kerr, so many people, even those that didn't affect me directly. Yvonne Bush, we had the Harris brothers, Walter Harris and Lloyd Harris. So the challenge that we have today in New Orleans is that we don't have that level of excellence being demanded all of the time, except for in athletics. I think across the country it's kind of that way, but especially in New Orleans. So we just, if something is important to us, and Hurl and Riley and I were discussing this after Hurricane Katrina, we started, a lot of folks are moving into town, interlopers from different places, and they're getting work and they're doing their thing, which is fine. But Hurlin and I agreed that the things that are important to us for the youngsters to learn, we would have to create those situations where, they could have access to the information. So that's a lot of what we're doing with the Uptown Jazz Orchestra now. We've got 3 young people from the city who are in the band. Is it 3? Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, who we're just giving them the hands-on experience. As far as the Uptown Music Theater, I kind of stumbled. I really have stumbled into a lot of this stuff, really. When I think about it, it's not like I had the master plan, but to condense a story, in 1992 or 3, I wrote a piece for the program called Meet the Composer. It was a blues for a school in Washington, D.C., Fillmore Art School, D Blues for youngsters. And through that, the Meet the Composer program sent me to Dallas, Texas, to work with the high school kids on opera. They needed somebody to talk about opera. So just went in with a very simple, basic plan, which is, okay, any music, which goes back to my high school training. You can analyze any music. You just say, okay, what's the instrumentation and how are they using it? So, for example, I said, name an artist, and I think they may have mentioned Prince or whoever they mentioned. We put the song on. They said, all right, name the instruments they have. Of course, they have the drums. How many drums? Bass drum, snare drum, might have some hi-hat. They've got the bass. They have a guitar, a lot of guitars. May have had keyboards, maybe not. You got your vocals, background vocals. This song didn't have any horns. So I'm like, okay, that's whatever that tallied up to, 8 instruments. I said, all right, let's put on this Puccini. Okay, now you've got an orchestra. So you have first and second violins, you've got the violas, you've got the cello and the bass. So that's 5, but I explained to you, there's going to be maybe 10 on each instrument. So you got 60 instruments, but they're probably going to be split up into about 7 or 8 different things. So I said, who's doing what? Talked about the bassoons, talked about the woodwinds. And once they hear it, the kids are hearing it, and they're like, oh, just it makes more sense to them now. So Anyway, I was supposed to go back, but I went the first time, a couple of days, and then the teacher called me. He's like, hey, these kids are writing their own opera, so we don't need you anymore. I'm like, damn. I got to be less effective the next time, you know. I lost the gig. But, and I started writing it was going to be an opera for the Dallas Opera, but I think they didn't really like the music so much, so they didn't pick it up. It's called Luther, and I was telling this story somewhere at in New Orleans at a luncheon or something, and there was a person who had a musical theater program, and she said, maybe we could do it's not an opera, we can do it as a musical with our program, our summer stages. So we did it, and I worked with the kids. It's 1997, and you know, the kids after that kept calling me and bothering me about, Mr. Delfeayo, why don't you start your own program? I was like, I don't really even like musical theater. But it's like, they were like, nah, come on, because they wanted they had a good time. And 3 years later, it took me 3 years, finally the kid calls me in January. When you gonna start your program? You know, I'm a senior. I said, all right, I'm gonna do it this summer. All right, you gonna stop calling me, please? So I just got a director called, John Grimsley, who's a director I knew in town. And it was literally that. It was as simple as that. And I said, okay, we just started, putting folks together. So, and now it's our 25th year after 25
Congratulations.
years ago.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so.
And there's so many students who have benefited from this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot over the years. And I had a real, what I consider more of a military approach to it. Like, just really, I didn't play around with the kids. It's like, and kids have a lot of trouble with discipline now. And I blame it on the Disney Channel, but also the parents. And we've allowed a lot. And I say the Disney Channel because they were kind of the first ones where the parents were all idiots, and the kids knew what was going on. It's like the kids were really cool, and the parents are just doofuses or whatever. So, and it's like you're watching this, and these kids grow up, and they're thinking this is.
I blame the Goonies.
Which one is that?
The Goonies.
I don't remember that one.
That movie? It's from the 90s. It's same idea.
Yeah, I think Disney might have. Well, maybe I don't know who was first, but I know for sure I'm watching these shows.
That actually might be a Disney property.
It probably is.
I don't know.
My daughter was young, and I'm watching. I said, "Oh, this is just ridiculous." But it's hard for these kids because they lose sight of the reality of what it is. And I think a lot of the adults, we kind of bought into that foolishness also. So, man, I don't play with the kids at all because you don't have time. You're trying to accomplish something. And, you got to have the parents talking about, oh, you can't break my child's spirit. I'm like, no, your child's not going to break my staff spirit. That's how this is going to go. Like, right. And, kids are tough once they understand what the boundaries are. But, as I look back, I think I could have been more affirming to them. I think that there's a point where you need the discipline, you need kind of that serious approach, but you also need to be affirmed. And as I look back, I even tell some of the kids, I meet them and I apologize, and they're like, it's cool. We know how you were going to be and this and that. And then some of them come back and then they work with the youngsters and they apologize to me. We're sorry if that's how we were. We had no idea. Because it's just a whole thing. Now, everybody has ADHD. Everybody. And you can't even say it. I just had a group of kids. I said, what did I say? I said, this is what it is, blah, 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 blah. And then I said, what did I just say? Huh? I said, okay, I guess you have ADHD. Is that what it is? Oh, yeah, you can't do that. Then they went home and he said, and I tell the parents straight up, said, look, if they're going to come here, this is just what it's going to be. Right. Like, you don't have to, you send them somewhere else. But, we get the results. And but it's been a learning experience. As far as the musicals, probably 2 of them are really good. The rest are just functional, But, I decided to write an American Legacy series at a school. And there was a school that my daughter was going to the school. And it's kind of maybe mixed a little bit. It's what we would say in New Orleans. It's a white school. But they have black kids there. So black parents got together and they were like, yeah, they don't celebrate Black History Month. So you got to help them celebrate Black History Month. And we went to the administration, and they were like, well, we don't really celebrate any ethnicity or this or that. And I'm like, yeah, but you got all of these holidays, and they're strategically placed. I'm going to just say that. At any rate, short version of that was I told the parents, I said, look, I'll write these musicals about Black history, provided it's never performed in the month of February. So they were like, okay. So the school agreed. March, April. They're going to learn about black folks in March and April, not just in February. So it was interesting. I learned. I'm just say that, but I learned a lot from these kids and just the perception of how things are. But that's what it was. And I wrote one on. We started with Harriet Tubman, Althea Gibson, which is actually my favorite. I think it's probably the best of those. And then we did one called Those Crazy 60s, which the kids really loved that. We had 60 kids doing the thing about the 60s. It's wacky. Try to get 60 kids to do anything. Try to get 60 of the people to just do anything. It's really kind of crazy. But my favorite scene from that was we said the British invasion. And we said the Beatles are coming. The Beatles are coming. And this is what it sounded like. So we just had all of the girls start screaming as loud as they could, and the boys are running up and down the stage, and the girls are. Anyway, it was silly.
Whatever works.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I should share with you the fact that there's schools like NOCA, which is at the high school level and is so effective. That's the institution that John Baptiste came out of, and they perform at New Orleans Jazz Fest. And one of the things they do that's really interesting is setting up seats for all the earliest, youngest students who are non-performing yet, but they sit behind the performing students just to feel what it's like on stage and to look out at the audience and to see their students who are just like a year or two older performing right in front of them with the realization that next year you're going to be there. So get prepared,
And that's always important. It's always important. And one thing with the Uptown Music Theater that we would always, first thing, we didn't really have auditions. Like whatever level you were at, you just have to deal with it. So if you're a beginner, then what happens is, and you see the more experienced kids, that makes you kind of step up. And then the more experienced kids then have to become mentors to the younger people. So they have a certain kind of responsibility. And whenever the kids first come in the program, I just pick on them mercilessly. It's unbelievable. Just oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm just if I were regulated, they'd be like, get him out of here. But the strategy is that, which usually works, is that the older kids, of course, then they come on, it's gonna be okay. And I say, if you can make it through those first couple of days, you say they're gonna be UMT for life. But the first some people, a couple of days, they're like, no, I can't deal with this. I gotta. So we say.
Am I correct in hearing a little bit of your father in that approach to teaching?
No, he was different, really. Because he would always set you up to come up with the answer, but it didn't. I don't want it to sound the wrong way, but I would just say he was not affected whether or not you came up with the answer. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you either did it or you didn't. He was not hung up on. How can I make sure that this person understands the information? And how can I make sure that how do I inspire this person? He's like, you're either inspired or you're not. That's his vibe about it all. So, okay, you want to play trombone? Okay, J.J. Johnson was probably the top level. Al Gray, he'd say, these are the people you should check out. You didn't check them out, you just didn't check them out.
Right.
If you said, he'd hear you play, and he always knew what he was really good at. So if he hear you play, then he would kind of know your strengths and your weaknesses. So if you were only going to actually be really good as a blues kind of a player, he would suggest the blues to you. He wouldn't say, you go learn, giant steps or all these difficult songs. Whereas if you had the propensity for that kind of material, he might lead you in that direction. So, he was just really a great teacher. And the other thing was that he really didn't talk a lot about it. That's really the hardest part about working with youngsters. It's just, here it is.
They got to make that move towards it.
Yeah. There's something profound about it. There's so much different. I'm more like my mom, actually, which is, it's like, what are you going to do? Like Branford said, fire and ice. My mom just like, Rah! My dad's just like, okay. And that's what it was,
we know of Ellis. We know of his piano playing and creating a label that's All for One Records in the 1960s, which was a move towards, financial and creative independence for jazz artists at the time. It was very unique. at that point. But at the same time, on your mother's side of the family, that's really the musical legacy, and that's kind of unusual because most people would expect that it was on your father's side.
Right.
You know,
I'd have to check with Jason, but I think Harold Baptiste actually started AFO.
okay.
I don't. Let me just text Jason and see. I would call him, but he's not going to answer. I'm going to just check. Jason is like the historian, so he's going to know for sure. But I think there was a fellow by the name of Harold Baptiste, and Harold Baptiste had written, he was an arranger for Sonny and Cher, and he was in Hollywood.
And later, Dr. John.
Right. And he came in, and he was, well, anyway, I can find that out later. But I know that my dad did record for AFO. My mom, yes, she had the musical talent on her side of the family. Wellman Bro was Duke Ellington's first bassist, and he's my mother's either uncle or great uncle. And there was a fellow named Alphonse Picou, and he would play clarinet, and he had it's famous amongst the New Orleans musicians, his version of High Society. And there's that famous, but he supposedly would play it with only a couple of keys or some kind of special clarinet. My dad had, nothing. No music at all. Nothing. His dad was a businessman, and his dad had the Colored Motel, the Marsalis Mansion, and
Where the musicians would stay, right? When they
where anybody,
Right.
any like I said, the Colored Motel, anybody colored, that's where you would say Martin Luther King came to town. He was at the Marsalis Mansion because that was like the top tier motel where folks could stay. But so my grandfather just wanted my dad to work in the motel. He was just a businessman. He was one of them guys that, come on, man, music, really? Like, that's what you want to do? So my dad worked at the motel, and he had the great idea that he would start a jazz club. But he knew that his father would not approve, so he didn't tell his dad. He got the piano in there, he got some drums, and then he set the club up. It was called the Music Haven. And he set the club up, and then he told his dad, he said, I got this set up. And my grandfather was like, yeah, okay, as long as you're making money, it's fine. It doesn't matter to me what you do. So the club was open for one night. He had the big night, nobody showed up. So he wrote a song for it. It's called Swinging at the Haven. So he said the club didn't last, but the song did. So that's the one that we like to play in honor of him, is Swinging at the Haven.
Thank you for sharing that story. I never knew that. What part of town was the Haven in?
So the motel was on Shrewsbury Road. It was actually in Shrewsbury, so it's not in New Orleans proper. So there's a road right along the levee, if you go along. So I guess it's River Road in New Orleans. If you keep going down River Road right along the levee, once you get toward Kenner, right past Metairie, is a little strip called Shrewsbury. It's not there anymore. They tore it down. But
Geography in New Orleans is a very important thing. And what part of town you're from, and who was playing there, and what the venues were, and still are, to this day. The one of the things we did on Tuesday this week over here was we did a kind of celebration and a talk about Art Blakey. And one of the things we talked, and we had some videos like of Wynton and Bradford, playing with Blakey. What was it like soloing with him behind you? I need to ask.
well, there's two things I would say. Art Blakey played the most masculine, manly drums ever played. Like it's like, if you say, man, what does a man sound like playing drums? Put a record of Art Blakey on, because there's no other way to just describe what that was like. But I would say,
Testosterone.
yeah, it's just like in any capacity. This, when you hear Art Blakey, it's like this was like. So by the time I played with in his band, he was like mostly deaf, so he could still kind of hear, but I think it was probably he was hearing shapes more than specifics. But if you've ever walked along a railroad track, we grew up in Kenner, so we would do this. You walk along the railroad track, and then you would look behind to see if there's a train approaching all of the time, just to make sure. And then, so you're soloing with Art Blakey. It's like you look back, and there's no train in sight, and then you walk a couple of more steps, and you look back and say, oh, okay, this train suddenly appeared. You walk a little further, and then, damn, the train's closer than I thought. and you go a little bit more. You go, by the time you're on your third chorus, that train, you start running like, oh wait, I got to get off the track, and that's what it was like. It's like that train was just coming at you, and then all of a sudden. But that's how he taught the youngsters how to develop solos. A lot of the youngsters today, and it's difficult for us as band leaders because now we have to teach the drummers, the young drummers, how to do that. So we have to, the one thing that I'm working with the drummer is like the solo needs to start off low and slow, and it needs to develop. It needs to develop. So the way that he's playing, so this youngster that's with us tonight, he's still learning the process, but it's telling him you have to actually be in control of it. Like you have to have enough confidence that, it's going to start off like that. And that's something that we're still keeping is that tradition. It's not just loud all of the time. A lot of youngsters have difficulty because they're learning to play with these play-along records. And it's just like, so you don't have the opportunity to tell the story the same way. And that's the thing. Blakey, Elvin Jones, Max, they all played that way. It was the same thing. It's like they kind of dictated how your solo was going to develop. And from night after night after night, you just automatically, you get the understanding of what it is. Like you never would just start off with them. It was never that. It was always make your statement, then you develop that statement, then you maybe make another statement, then you're developing both of those statements, then you're adding the intensity, then you're adding the volume, then you're adding the range. It's like, it's a logic to it. It's like great storytelling. So it's difficult today because now guys just want to run everything. And I'm like, bro, you got to take it easy. Take it, you're going to tell your audience the story. You don't want to just have a bunch of words that you're throwing at people, So that's what I would say was like Art Blakey was,
How long were you with Blakey?
I was just with him for a couple of months. It wasn't a long tenure, and it was, I had other things that I was doing. I was doing kind of more studio work at the time, and then we had a string of gigs, and I was like, "It's paying what? Yeah, I don't know if I can make that." And that was it. But it was, it was kind of, I would say with Blakey, that was more Branford and Winton's thing.
Right.
With, for me, it was once I met up with Elvin Jones, and I was able to spend some time with him. Then it was really the greatest learning experience. And I was at a different place. Even though it was, do the math on that, it was probably 7 or 8 years apart. It was a big difference in those 7, 8 years where I was,
of course,
musically.
Of course. What did Elvin bring to you? What did you learn from your years with Elvin? How to deal with Keiko?
Well,
That was his wife, manager,
but
drum tech,
look,
and everything.
That's the kind of woman you want. I'm just telling you, Elvin didn't do anything but read books and play drums. She took care of everything. I mean, she was just special. She was really, really unique. But Elvin, he was a really kind and considerate and compassionate individual. And I sensed that more so than Art Blakey. Not, just my experience with Blakey did not lead me to that understanding of his personality to that degree. But with Elvin, he just was really kind and considerate, and it's something that you might not necessarily know. But that's the main thing that I learned about him is the passion that he played with. It came from a certain place of caring and love. And all the music kind of sprang from that. And the one story I tell you about Elvin, it's not so much related to the music. The condensed version is.
Some water there.
Oh yeah, let's go. The condensed version is, I had to produce a soundtrack for Winton. Winton wrote the music for this movie Rosewood. They ended up not using the music, but the pay was good. So I was supposed to go to Europe with Elvin, and I told Keiko, I'm not going to make that first week. The mistake was not telling Elvin, but she handled all the business. But I told Keiko, I'm not going to make that first week. So she wouldn't let me out of it. Oh, brah, you're going to make the right decision, brah. She would call me brah. I said, I'm not going to be there. I'm not going to be there. Anyway, I missed the first couple of nights, and Elvin called. We had words. I said, I'm going to try to be out there as soon as I can. So I left the session early. We finished the recording. Anyway, I get to Europe, and I'm all excited to play with Elvin. Elvin was not in a good mood for whatever reason, like through the course of the, so he's just playing really loud, and just it just wasn't music. It was just he was just upset. That's the only way I could. I don't know if he was upset necessarily at me or how that went down, but so finally I told him, I said, look, man, I've been looking forward to coming out here, but it's like the music is just loud. It's just, the band doesn't sound good. I'm like, man, I'm ready to go home. So I told him this, whatever, dinner time. So clearly he had thought about this. So 2:30 in the morning, I get a knock at the door, and it's Elvin, and he comes in. I could tell he's actually hurt by what I said to him, and he said, well, I've been thinking if you don't want to be out here, then you should just go home. So we'll make arrangements. It was strange because we hadn't had that kind of relationship before then. But I'm realizing I'm trying to wake up, and I'm like, damn, this man. I actually hurt his feelings by telling him this. So I was kind of relieved. I said, okay, this will be the easiest thing. So the next morning, of course, I saw Keiko, and she said, no, bruh. She's like, you going to finish this tour. So I called my dad. I'm like, man, I'm out here. And I told him the situation. I said, I'm ready. I'm going to just come home, man. And he said, come home for what? I said, well, man, I don't like it. What's going on out there? And he said, do you have another gig lined up? I said, well, no. He said, you never leave a gig unless it's for another gig, because you never know when the next gig will be. And I'm like, oh, man, why are you making sense to myself? I'm like, don't even be saying this kind of stuff. Just tell me it's okay for me to come on. And he said, man, this is the classic E line. It sounds like it was from a movie. He said, the answers that you're searching for, you can only find them on the road. You're not going to find those answers at home. Which was his approach, it was all logical. It's like, you're out on the road, you're getting paid, you're learning how to play. You're going to come home and do what? That was my dad. That was him right there in a nutshell. It was like, his vibe was like, and then I stayed out there, and then we worked it out. And I'm like, that was old school. Like that kind of training, the training, what I learned from both Elvin Jones and my dad, and from Keiko, in that one scenario, it's like, that's life changing. And it's like, it's difficult to get the youngsters to understand the whole dynamic of what everything is, so.
That's so deep. Thank you so much for sharing that with
that's-
us.
That's one of, there's other stories, musical type stories, but to me that was the main memory.
That is
of
music,
Elvin.
though. That is part of the whole music experience.
And Elvin was like, like that generation, man, they was cut from another cloth. So another thing, so Elvin, we would go to Japan every year, and toward the end, like it was tough. Elvin had surgeries on his knees. He was not in good shape at all. And we get to Japan, and the people in Japan really loved him. They would see him every year, and I think everybody knew that they were not going to see him after this particular tour. So we're in some city. I don't remember which city it was, but we had to play in it. There was a tent, and it was up this long kind of a hill, and it was raining, and Elvin couldn't walk up the hill, so they got a dolly, and they tied a chair to the dolly, and these guys, like, they brought Elvin up, and it's like everybody's cheering, Elvin, Elvin, Elvin. So we get in there, man, and I'm saying, how you feel, Vane? He's like, his legs is killing him, and his mental capacity, he was he was definitely on the way out. Man, the people just keep cheering, Elvin, Elvin. So they said there's like some 12-year-old kid who plays drums. He was going to go play him. When Elvin heard that, he was like, oh, hell no. He stood up and got behind the drums. And it was not clearly the most memorable. Those last gigs, you don't hear it and say, oh, my God, the great Elvin Jones. But just what it took for him, like understanding the level of pain that he was in. But he was just that kind of a warrior, man. He's like, I'm going to just make it happen to the best of my abilities. And, so that's when you're around people like that have that kind of fortitude, it impacts you. It impacts you.
That level of dedication. Yeah. Again, thank you for sharing this. This is very special stories that you're carrying and history that you've experienced.
I got one Max Roach story.
Okay.
It's a brass quintet, and we played the Regatta Bar in Boston, and we played the first set. There's no piano in it. It's just 5 tuba, French horn, 2 trumpets, and me. So I think it's a 75-minute set. So we finished the first set. I said, Max, we finished. He says, all right, what do y'all think? Anybody got anything to say? And nobody said anything. And I said, Max, I thought the intensity was really good for the first 45 minutes, but then it kind of seemed like we dropped off, man. So we got to try to keep it going for the duration. And he said, anybody else? Nobody said anything. So we get to the second set, and he says, first song, he says, Donna Lee, Marsalis, you got it. And it's like, and the melody's like, so at the end of that set, anybody got anything to say? Nope. No. No, sir. Beautiful. I mean, it was like, okay, point taken. Yes, sir. Yeah. Old school.
Right. Absolutely. And another day that would have been Cherokee or something like that.
Well, Cherokee, okay. Ba da 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 da. Ting 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 ting. But Donna Lee, like that
Right.
melody is it's literally is that. It's just like, oh, okay, now what?
This apprenticeship period that you went through with all these legends. Of course, you experienced the world. You traveled everywhere, and now your focus is much more at home. So it's not like you inherited that idea of developing a group of your own to travel the world, to have the Uptown Jazz Orchestra. You're not going to get that many gigs. There's a number of musicians. I mean, the economic reality of a big band is such that you don't get that many offers. But was this a conscious decision on your part to not go into a small group situation and continue on that same path?
Well, there again, I kind of stumbled into this too. And how it happened was the year after Hurricane Katrina, we had 06, there's a fellow in town who had a big band, and he hired me to play Duke Ellington's Nutcracker Suite. He hired me as one of the trombonists. And these guys just had a different concept of music. It was a Christmas show for kids, and he did all the arrangements of the Christmas songs. For some reason, they're all in minor keys. So it's that kind of a concert. It's like, so you got these kids in the audience, and they're sitting looking at this. And but I realized, too, there's like, they had no opinion one way or the other. They're just literally, okay, what is this?
This wasn't Adonis Rose, or it
Oh,
was
no,
before
no,
that.
no, no,
Okay,
no. This
okay.
definitely was not Adonis.
Okay.
This was,
All right.
it just wasn't the right band. Let me just say that. Let me see that. It wasn't the right band. So that experience, I said to whoever I said, I'm going to pull together a band next year so that we can play this music the way it's supposed to sound. So got these guys together. And a lot of guys in New Orleans, they either don't read music or they hadn't read music in, 15, 20 years. So we rehearsed for 3 months. We started rehearsing, I would imagine, end of August. By September, that's when we started to rehearse. And we rehearsed, and we rehearsed, and we rehearsed. I mean, much more rehearsing than you would imagine. And I found that they were guys that wanted to do it, that would sit there, and we rehearsed, and we did that thing. And man, when we started playing, it was, my dad actually, he played on that first thing. It was correct. It was swinging. It was the way that, to me, the essence of the music was captured. Not just the notes on the page, but the essence of what the music was about. So now we finish, and the guys in the band's like, man, let's keep this going. You ought to do something with it. And I'm like, I don't know about that. So I went to my dad. He said, well, you got to get a gig. He said, you find you a place I said, where are we going to gig? And he said, well, a gig ain't nothing but a space and some people. Find a space, get the people, and there you go. So I said,
I'm glad this is being recorded because there's a lot of wisdom here. I
that's
don't want to lose.
That's one of the great lines. So we went to Snug Harbor. I actually condensed it. He said that about another situation, but yeah, condensed it. So we went to Snug Harbor. Actually, we went to Snug Harbor. We started playing. I had a riff with the management. That's when he said that line, because I stopped playing at Snug Harbor, and he was like, well, you just find a space and get the people. But it ended up being that we went back to Snug Harbor, and we just kept it going. I mean, it was literally a labor of love. I mean, we were making whatever, $40, $50, a night or whatever it was. But it's an opportunity, to play in a big band is it's a special kind of a situation. And we're still trying to work it out. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to play more like a small group setting, which is tough because guys want to solo. Anyway, it's a lot going on. But I like the idea of bringing folks together with the Uptown Music Theater, with the Jazz Orchestra. It's just something that I'm able to do. And I don't know if it's from coming from a large family, but like productions and producing things that have a lot of moving parts. It's just, I kind of have a way of making that happen. So I don't want to say I don't necessarily feel an obligation, but I like the idea of doing it. I like it. So we've been just at it, and we initially were coming out and we were just playing the Duke Ellington. Initially we were doing like a junior version of what Winton was doing at Lincoln Center. So we're playing Duke Ellington music, we're playing Count Basie music, we're playing a lot of the standard repertoire. And then I went on the road. I had a different thing, Sweet Thunder project that I did with a small group. When I came back, the band had kind of changed the repertoire. They were playing because we had Roger Lewis, who was with the Dirty Dozen Brass Band. We call him the Dirty Old Man. And he's Dirty Old Man. So he was playing certain songs.
Who also played with Fats Domino.
He played with Fats Domino, and I played with Fats Domino. Yeah, which is another whole kind of experience there. My regret when I played with the Fats Domino was that my concept of music was not such that I truly understood how great he actually was. Because to me, I was studying the different things. I was going to Berkeley, studying the jazz thing, and it's like, oh, this guy, everything is 1, 4, and 5. It's like, come on, this is what y'all the guys are doing. And now I'm like, Lord, if I had that chance today. But that's how that goes, But they changed the repertoire, and they were playing more kind of brass band stuff. And I said, okay, that's different. And then I used to host a TV show, and I had 3 trombone players on the show. It was Trombone Shorty, a guy named Big Sam Williams, and Corey Henry. And for some reason, they all played the song that we may even play tonight. It's called the Whippin' Blues. It's E-flat blues. And they played solo. And from hearing them, I'm like, man, these guys sound similar. They played with a New Orleans rhythmic sensibility that I did not, because I'm coming out of the J.J. Johnson, more of the modern jazz kind of a rhythmic sensibility. And that changed everything. That changed everything. Just hearing them, and I said, this is what we have to do.
Around what year was that?
Would have been around 2015, 16, somewhere between 13 and 16. No, it must have been, it must have been closer to 13, 14, somewhere around there. Because we started in the next week. So the show was on a Thursday. Shorty was on there that Thursday. And then the next time we played was the following Wednesday. And I came in and I said, man, I got this idea for this long hair song. Roger's like, yeah, like, you know what that is immediately when you hear that. Right. And that was the one that started it off, and so now we're just kind of hearing that sound. So interesting what we're going to do tonight, though, because I'm listening at the brass band set, because if they're doing a lot of brass band, then usually we start off with a brass band number. Right. But we might change up the repertoire depending on what they're doing. So
that's beautiful. It brings to mind one question I always have in my head, and this was kind of a plot point in Hynmay, the TV show, where the jazz player goes up to New York. and he's like doing the New York jazz thing, which is no vocals. It's post bop kind of focus, and he gets back to New Orleans, and of course New Orleans, there's the Satchmo tradition of both singing and playing the instrument, and also engaging the audience in a different way than modern jazz does. Can you comment on that kind of line between the two?
Modern jazz kind of has had a bad rap for a number of reasons. The biggest problem was Miles Davis and Bill Evans. The reason I say that is, unfortunately, when Miles lost his voice, he could no longer engage with the audience. Now, when I was going through the Columbia archives of photos, there's a photo of Herbie Hancock. He was on a gig with Miles, and he's at the microphone. And I tried to ask, Herbie couldn't remember, and I asked him, man, like, do you know what were you, like, do you remember, were you introducing the songs, or were you talking to the audience? But it was just odd, because Miles had that reputation, but because Miles lost his voice, and I think it was kind of an embarrassing thing when he would say things that people didn't understand it, his solution was just to not talk to anybody. That then became associated with the music. Or the cool way to do to play jazz is you don't talk to the audience. That's the cool thing. But it's literally only because Miles lost his voice.
Right.
It was because Miles, and Max Roach said to me that he said Miles was the only one in the bebop era, when they were growing up, when they were coming up in the 40s, Miles was the one that said, we got to figure out how to make some money playing this music. He said nobody else was thinking that way. He said, and he wasn't saying it, he said, I'm not saying it as a good or a bad. I'm just telling you, like, Charlie Parker, Fats Navarro, none of us were thinking about that. He said Miles came in and he was like, we got to make some money doing this. So Miles had kind of a bigger vision, and I'd really say that it was unfortunate he lost his voice, so now he's not talking to the audience. Now he gets Bill Evans, and Bill Evans is just like, he like the mad scientist. He's got the goofy glasses, and he's doing this thing. So now this is what you get to choose. If you want to play modern jazz, you can either not talk to the audience, or you can be like, Bill Evans definitely didn't talk to the audience. I don't think. It was just, so it's like the persona became this thing that it's like, whereas you look, if you go backwards, man, Jimmy Lumpster's band, like look at some of those videos. Dizzy Gillespie, I mean, he was a character. You know what I'm saying? So we went from having a lot of character and personality in the music to now.
Dizzy Gillespie.
Yeah, so yeah. We went from that, guys were playing with Cab Calloway, you had a lot of excitement in the bands, to just this thing where it's like, I think they were not originally associated, but they became associated. So what ultimately happens is the people who are attracted to the music now are those kinds of people who don't want to talk to the audience, people who they don't want to engage, so they're attracted to the music. So it's just one, and then you got Coltrane. Coltrane was tough too. So now you got the three primary, because you listen to that Kind of Blue, and Cannonball Adderley was the guy that had that outgoing personality. Nobody talks about Cannonball Adderley.
Right.
They only want to talk about Miles, Train, and Bill Evans. And it's like, oh my God, this is a recipe for disaster. And that's what we have. It's just because the great thing about the music has always been that you've had these many different options. You could have Louis Armstrong, or you could have Miles Davis, or you could have Clifford Brown, or you could have the Count Basie Orchestra. You could have a whole array of possibilities. And now it's like, okay, if you're going to play modern jazz, it's got to be like I told you, that concert where everything's in a minor key.
Right.
And the audience is like, oh, what's going on here? And it's just kind of this thing that goes on. It's like we play a song, we'll play it tonight, Inner Urge. All these guys want to play on the Inner Urge, boy. They just love playing Inner Urge, and it's just like
the Joe Henderson tune.
The Joe Henderson tune. And I'm literally like, why do you want to play that song? Man, I just loved it, but why? But they love it because it is the least audience friendly of the songs. No, I shouldn't say it that way. I shouldn't say it's the least audience friendly, but it's the most musician centric. It's the most thing that the musicians are like, yeah, man, you were killing that. I'm over it. I'm completely over it. I'm over it. And it's like, okay. But I think that it's good. It's like like I say, when you go to get a 10-course meal, everything can't be the stuff you like. You always got to have that one dish where you're like, whew, okay, I wouldn't have thought of that. So it's cool.
When I think of New Orleans, of course, there's great jazz players, but there's also Trombone Shorty, and there's his older brother James Andrews, and their cousin Glenn, and just looking at the Andrews,
First of all, the entire brass band community is related to the Andrews family. Like,
really?
Oh yeah, everybody. It's like they got cousins and nephews. Oh yeah, it's unbelievable. But that's just a dynasty. Talk about a musical dynasty. And they just have that understanding, But I mean, in fairness, Shorty he's just different. Shorty is just you can't.
That's true.
Years ago, somebody was like, they called me from Quincy Jones's office. He said, Quincy's trying to assemble, a band of musicians like Trombone Shorty. And I'm like, there's only been one. Like, who would you say is like Trombone Shorty? No, really. It's like if we said who else is like Trombone Shorty in the history of the music. You're not going to come up, nobody in my family, nobody. Louis Armstrong wasn't like Shorty. I'm just saying, so it's like, it's not even a fair thing. I would say, tell Quincy he's not going to find it. I'm not going to find it. He's not going to find it. But
so true.
And Shorty's a great guy, and he's given me some sound advice. Nothing but respect for Shorty, and he's clear about it. He studied the jazz, and he knows it. He's learned it, but he utilizes it to enhance what he does, which is to play more rock, kind of a rock thing, and he doesn't have any kind of no hang up about what it is he does. And I've heard guys try to talk bad about, he only does this. I said, yeah, okay, you get him on the bandstand. You're talking that noise. But I think that's the great thing about Shorty and about a lot of New Orleans musicians is just the honesty that they play with. It's just a certain kind of honesty about this is what it is, especially the brass band guys. That's what it is. It's just honest. They're not faking who they are. It's like they're playing true and genuine. A lot of the guys who want to play this modern stuff, they can hide who they actually are behind the barrage of kind of the harmony or the progression or this or that. And I think that's what the audience really, when you see something that's true from an audience standpoint of view, and I mentioned Roger Lewis, the Dirty Old Man, everybody loves Roger Lewis, man. We play songs, Roger's not playing a single chord change right. But he's got that thing. He's got that great personality, and it's like, guys like, man, they trying to vibe on Roger. I'm like, Roger's the all-star. Roger's the only guy. I'd be traveling somewhere in Chicago. Hey, is the old guy still playing sax with you? It's like, he isn't, but I'm getting back.
He connects through so many of the most important groups of the last 50 years in New Orleans.
He played with Fats Domino, and that was that understanding of what the music really represents. To me, the music has become something other than what it should be. The music should be really about the people, and it should include the people some way, which is not to say everybody has to have this reach out to the audience and this and that, but you have to have that understanding. Like you go to one of Branford's gigs, Lord have mercy, you've got to really love jazz to sit through that, because it's just like, come here, but he was already down. I don't care. Like WWE on steroids. And then at the end of it, he's going to play on the sunny side of the street. Like that makes up for it. It's like,
meanwhile, I'm on the ground going, do it again. Do it again.
Yeah. He's like, but it's cool. He stole some stuff from me. He's like, the kind of the setup of it. But, that's how I stole a lot from him. And, Winston. Yeah. And we all kind of have this thing that we... But yeah, I'd say, man, you got to really love the music.
But Branford is definitely comfortable talking to the audience, engaging the audience.
He has to be with that stuff he's playing, Lord, because it sure ain't. They're like, oh my goodness, how long is this gonna last?
I think we have about 1 minute left. Jazz Party, the new album. Tell us about the range. I mean, there's so much of a range that you're covering, and so the development of the Uptown Jazz Orchestra is so well represented by this new album. Tell us about that and how it connects with what we're going to see tonight.
Well, my concept, I guess, has developed into the idea that you should be able to represent as much of the music as possible, because it all represents a certain type of an emotional awareness and understanding. There's a great recording of Tommy Dorsey's band in the 40s. I just can't remember the name of it. It might be the post-war era, Tommy Dorsey. But his band is emulating the Ellington band from what they call the jungle period.
Right.
And it's like when you hear it, if you just heard that, there's no possibility you'd say, oh, that's Tommy Dorsey's band. But what Dorsey understood was that by learning the way that the Ellington Orchestra played, that his musicians would be better able to express whatever music they played. So the concept for me is that we need to understand what Louis Armstrong and the traditional New Orleans sound, we need to understand the sound of swing, especially the swing is the thing. And I keep telling that's the one thing we cannot abandon, because that's the one thing most people cannot do is actually swing. That's the hardest thing. So that's something that we're always going to have some swing, but then also to play more of the modern, we want the romance. So we want to be able to bring as much, that is available to the table. We're going to have the modern, so that when you hear the entire concert, it's not just like one particular thing. So I still got a couple of things more that I want to do, more experimental things, maybe Ornette Coleman, that kind of stuff is difficult to do with big band. But I want to get more of that and more things that I would say are modern. And then we have to go back and address the 30s. Branford's putting heat on me about the 30s. It's like, bro, come on, give me a break. It's like, Branford's one of those. I just got to keep him away from the gigs, though, because he's always like, no, they weren't playing that right. Okay, bro, okay. We're going to work on it. But it's like, yeah, it's a 6 chord. It's not a dominant chord. It's a 6. Okay, we're going to play the 6 chord. But that's the idea for us, is to keep growing and just to try to cover as much ground as possible.
Indeed. I mean, it's a superpower that you've developed, being able to reach back, make it relevant again today, and find that, bring the roots up front, and that's what we're going to hear tonight. I know that.
Well, the last thing I would say, and I always tell the students this, and I know they don't want to hear it, and the difference between, I guess, when my dad told me stuff that I didn't want to hear is that I at least acknowledged the reality of it. My Favorite Things allowed John Coltrane's band to work. That's why you have 852 versions of My Favorite Things and not as many versions of any other song. Is what Elvin Jones was like. Elvin said before My Favorite Things, we'd go to Europe and it'd be 4 plane tickets in 1 hotel room for John. And he said after My Favorite Things, though, it was 4 hotel rooms. So financially, I'm always telling the students, you've got to find songs that will give you that, financial ability to play. If you want to play this stuff that nobody wants to hear, you have to also play stuff that people do want to hear. And most students are like, no, I'm not going to do it. And it's like, okay, I don't know what other profession allows you to do that. It's like, I'm going to be a doctor, but I'm not going to do anything that people need. I'm not going to help people to cure people. Really, man, what are you going to do? I don't know, but I don't know. So it's like, wow, good luck with that. But that's my thing, is just, is just how can we, and I'm trying to figure out what we can do with kind of what's going on in the pop field. It's kind of hard to really kind of, gather things in. But, we got a Motown special coming, so we'll see what we come up with.
Oh, beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Delfeayo Marsalis.
Papa
we'll
was
see
a
you this
Rolling
evening.
Stone.